there was an interesting article on Forbes. Now, I always assumed that Forbes was more about financial news, the stock market, bonds, so on and so forth. But believe it or not, Forbes actually has a lot of variety. This article talked about how millennials are having high rates of anxiety in the workplace. Reading through the comments, because this was on a social media site, you got into that nature versus nurture argument. Some people talked about how millennials are emotionally fragile. Their parents protected them from a lot, and therefore they are mentally fragile. You had the other side of the coin, where millennials talked about how difficult it is because of student loans, because of the job market, and other factors that make it more difficult for them to get ahead. My basic opinion is that two things can be true at once. When you're looking for a reason of why something is like it is, you find variables, which are things that cause what it is to happen. So I posted on there, I said two things can be true at once. Number one, millennials have it a lot more difficult than the previous generations. And then number two, they are mentally weak. Someone commented and they said, actually, back in the day, it was a lot more difficult, over 5,000 years ago. And I responded, I said, well, it depends. Maybe physically, when it was more about the human versus the environment, back in the hunter-gatherer days, you were fighting against the elements, you were hunting for your food, trying to find water. But the human species has two primary needs. Well, three once you get past survival. And those two primary needs are reproduction and providing. Back in the hunter-gatherer days, someone who was 15 or 16 years old, if they were in good shape, they were able-bodied, they knew the tricks of the trade, they very easily could reproduce, and they could provide by gathering resources. But I always tell people the American dream does not exist anymore. It is dead. My dad, who is in his 50s, talked about how once he graduated high school, he could walk in somewhere, show them his resume, get a job, and have enough money to provide on one income. His wife could stay home. He could afford a house, a car payment, maybe a vacation or two a year, move into a middle-class neighborhood, and so on and so forth. But you can't do that anymore. In the state of Tennessee, where I currently live, you have to make at least $20 just to be able to afford your house, groceries, your car payment, insurance payment, so on and so forth. And a good job in Tennessee, factory job, will pay you maybe $15 an hour. So the question is, what has caused this to transpire? Well, one of the things is that you got to look at when did this phenomenon begin. It really started in the 90s after we signed NAFTA. So the way to measure this metric is what percentage was manufacturing in the economy. Well, even if you look at the 70s and 80s, it was over 20% of the economy, according to the U.S. Commerce Department. Now it is around 13% of the economy. But manufacturing as a whole used to be what got American citizens good jobs. Working at GM, working at Ford, they got benefits, so on and so forth. So one of the things is we are now producing a lot of this stuff in China. And then they're putting their people in the slave factories in China, making them produce these things. Another factor is letting low-skilled immigrants from the third world migrate into the country. They are willing to work for less money. You increase the competition in the labor pool, and therefore it lowers the wages for the normal, average American worker. There is this chicken factory in my town. I don't want to say the name. I don't want to give them any publicity at all. But they were paying their workers $7.25 an hour. They got raided by ICE, Immigration Custom Enforcement. After they were raided, they increased the pay to $12.50 an hour. See, when you have a increased labor pool, it causes businesses to be able to be more picky who they hire, and it causes people to have to work for less wages. Another variable is Walmart. Walmart has really replaced Main Street. And what I mean by that is most of our production used to be local, even in the 60s. You had local TV repair shops. You had local grocers. You had local farmers who would grow most of the food. But as a result of factory farming, as a result of mass production, Walmart has taken over as the primary corporation of the United States. They are the largest employer in the U.S. But the reason that I hate Walmart is because they don't pay their employees anything. They pay their employees crumbs. And then the employee has to get food stamps. And you know who pays for the food stamps? The taxpayer. And so the taxpayer pays for the food stamps, and then the person who has those food stamps gets a discount at Walmart, so they shop at Walmart, and we're essentially subsidizing Walmart to pay their workers like shit. And Bernie Sanders actually had a decent idea in this particular area. I disagree with the dude on a lot of stuff, but it was called the Stop Bezos Act, where if Amazon or Walmart was going to make their worker be paid a low wage to such a degree that they were going to have to take government funding, that they would have to pay that out of their own pocket back to the American taxpayer. And I'm for that. Why the hell does a billionaire, the Walton family is the richest family in the United States, which is fine. I don't care that they have more money. But my issue is that they're paying their workers slave wages, and then they are passing down that cost onto us. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. And then Walmart is the number one importer from China. So all of those goods that used to be produced in the United States are now being imported from China. So when you have most of your production being produced in China, you have a higher competition in the labor pool. You have trade deals that are transferring our production to other places. It is going to be increasingly difficult for a normal worker to find a job that will give them enough to provide for their family. I get it. Unemployment is at all-time lows. I understand that. But at the same time, You have to make such an insane amount of money just to be able to function, just to be able to pay your bills. And that's just being able to pay your bills. That's not having a family, going on vacation, or doing anything that Americans used to do. But as far as the other side of the coin, having anxiety, depression, blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the things is that these millennials, they go to college. But when they go to college, they study stupid shit. See, they don't want to become a productive member of society. A lot of them don't. They don't want to be doctors. They don't want to be construction workers. They want to be activists. Social justice activists. So they go to college, they learn some bullshit degree. Because college is not just an investment of money, but an investment of time in yourself to educate, to mold your mind. And the hope is that the time you spend and the money you spend in college, that you can get a payoff. It's like when you invest your money in the stock market. You hope in the future that when you plant that seed, you can get a profit, right? Well, that's the same hope when you go to college. But a lot of these people, they get these bullshit degrees. And as a result, when they get out of college, they can't pay back their student loans. And so they get into debt. Then they have to take a job waiting tables or working at Starbucks. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But you think if you go to college for 4 years or more, that you can get a better job. Because what's the purpose of education if you can't produce a skill or service in the economy? And so that's another reason. Another reason is because we are the daycare generation. The mothers would go to work and the fathers because some were forced to. But what you had happen was this interesting dynamic where they would be in daycare. And when you're a kid, you want attention, right, from adults. So when you were in daycare, how was it that you got attention? You acted out, right? When you threw the toy truck, when you made a loud sound, you were given attention. You acted out. And so you see these grown adults who are acting like children, who are throwing tantrums, who are knocking over garbage cans. I mean, if you want to see this on a grand scale, which is emblematic of what's going on, take a look at some of these college students when Trump was elected. They, regardless of what you think, they literally acted like babies. They literally acted insane. And a lot of these were millennials that did this shit. And also, a lot of them were not breastfed. That was when their mom started bottle feeding them. Now, breast milk has a lot of nutrients in it that help develop your brain. Don't have time to go into all of this, but if you aren't breastfed and you're bottle fed, your brain doesn't develop properly. Another thing is that these millennials are constantly on social media. Your brain processes information. What's around you? Your sight, your touch, your smell, right? But when you're constantly looking at information, whether it's news information, comparing yourself to others in terms of finances or looks, then you're going to feel down about yourself. So you combine that as well. And then a lot of them are mentally fragile. Think about it. Older generations, like the World War II generation, were forced to work on farms in the hot sun. They were forced to go storm the beaches of Normandy. They were forced to live during the Great Depression. And when you're forced to live during something that catastrophic, your brain gets used to it. It's like exercise. The more you lift weights, the easier it becomes because your brain builds neurological pathways and you become used to it. So when you put yourself through adversity, then you tend to develop more neurological pathways. You tend to do better. That's why kids that come from poor neighborhoods deal with adversity a lot better in some cases than students who came from upper class neighborhoods. But basically, these millennials did not have any major wars. They did not have any major economic downturns or anything that forced them to have to toughen up. So when you combine these factors, see, I'm just looking at variables that all combine to create this dynamic. So for me, it's a combination. Yeah, millennials are weak mentally, but at the same time, our system has let them down. But what's stupid is these millennials are not going to vote for their best interest. A lot of them, they love illegal immigration. They love socialism. They love... The stupid thing is they hate Trump. I get it. You don't like the guy as a person. I get that. I'm not a big fan of him either, but the stuff he's trying to implement is directly trying to help improve things for the American worker. I mean, number one, he's trying to improve the trade deals. Think about it. If we produce more in the United States, then and we remove trade barriers to China, then the wages will go up. If we get rid of illegal immigration to a certain degree, then wages go up. But these dumbass millennials, they love socialism and they cry like little bitches every time Donald Trump does anything. So I kind of look at it like this. They deserve what comes to them. A lot of them, they're going to vote for socialism. The allocation of resources is going to become scarce because if nobody's going to pay a shit ton of money, work a lot of hours, and not get anything in return. Not get any monetary compensation, right? That's what happens. In socialism, eventually you run out of people's money. So we're going to run out of money, and then they're going to be even more depressed and anxiety. But I got no sympathy for them. See, if you're going to have Stockholm Syndrome, if you're going to vote against your own interest, I got no sympathy for you. I don't. I'm sorry. And I'm saying this as a millennial. The millennials are the dumbest fucking generation that ever